Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Happy Monday. It's a pleasure to welcome. Oh, we're ready. Sorry. That was practice. I was testing the mic. Yes, we're ready. Y'all tell me when. Could you run? Thank you. My team is awesome. They think of everything.
Five, four, three, two.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the UVI 13D Research and Strategy Innovation Center. And today we are here for the second annual Business Leadership Lecture. So welcome to UVI. This building actually is a center for faculty, for staff, and the community, and for students. It's really for all of us. We have actually hosted many events in this building, like the Math Counts competition for the St. Thomas St. John District, where we brought together about 40 students to compete in some very challenging mathematics competitions. We've hosted the Level Up Youth Conference, the Empower You Youth Conference. We are also home to the Coral Wings Aviation Program for high school students to become licensed pilots and drone operators. So we have lots going on here at the Research and Strategy Innovation Center. But today, we are going to welcome a very special keynote speaker. But before we welcome him, I want to bring up the president of the University of the Virgin Islands, Dr. David Hall.
Thank you, Pam. I appreciate your leadership, and I want to welcome all of you here today. And we especially are thankful to have David Roberts to serve as our keynote speaker. He'll be introduced later, so I won't go into all of the details. But I just want to say to you that this is a wonderful way to kick off our Charter Week celebration. For those of you who may not know, this university was chartered 62 years ago on March 16th. And in those 62 years, this university has had a tremendous impact in the territory. Over 8,000 graduates have gone out into the world and have produced great things for us. But we've also, through research and public service, had a tremendous impact on the territory, and I would argue the world. So I am very thankful that we could have this lecture during Charter Week because it is a continuation of the growth and the creativity of this university. But it is also an opportunity for us to host Kirill Sokolov, who has been a tremendous contributor to this university and has allowed us to achieve things not only during Charter Week, but during our existence that is unique and different. There are other members of his organization, 13D, who you will hear from later on, and you will hear from him as well, but want to welcome and thank you for being here. The coming into existence of the University of the Virgin Islands not only has had an impact on the territory, but it has had an impact on me personally. I have served in the role of president for 15 years, and I can say without a doubt it has been the highlight of my professional career, and it is something that has transformed and changed my life. And for that, I am very, very thankful. But I'm also thankful that the forces of the universe did some other types of things 62 years ago that has transformed my life. Tomorrow is the birthday of my wife, Dr. Marilyn Braithwaite Hall. So I know you thought you were invited here to hear a lecture, but this is really a birthday party for Marilyn. But seriously, not only has she enriched my life, but she has made, in her role as First Lady of the University, friend to UVI, has made quite a contribution to this university and territory, and we are just delighted that she, too, came into existence during Charter Week. We have some other special guests that I want to mention. Many of you may remember that one of our Charter Day keynote speakers and commencement speaker in the same year was Dr. Robert Franklin. He is making his yearly visit to the University of the Virgin Islands, along with his wife, Dr. Cheryl Franklin, and we want to thank both of them for coming and being a part of this lecture. Pam has done a wonderful job describing what the center is all about, how it is trying to expose our students to technology and innovation, and how it's trying to do that for the community. But there's something special about this lecture, because part of the vision of this building is that we would not limit the power of the cutting-edge thinkers in the world to just MIT and Silicon Valley and other places. That here, in the Virgin Islands, in this small HBCU, that we would also bring together the best minds around technology innovation, around disruption, around all sorts of forces that are happening in the world, so that the Virgin Islands can also be up to date on what is happening and be participants in that change process. And so we launched this series last year, and we are continuing it this year with David Roberts. We hope that all of us, by participating in this process, will leave here more enlightened and more informed. And finally, none of this could be in existence or could come into existence without the generosity, without the visionary leadership of Kirill Sokolov. And as I indicated, this is my 15th year as president, and Kirill has been here every step of the journey. He has not been just a donor to the university, he has been a friend. And the reason I can say that is that he has been able to combine a robust and cutting-edge mind with a robust and sensitive heart. And together, those two forces can transform the university, can transform the universe. So 15 years ago, I created a process, and I named it the President's Appreciation Award, that at every board meeting, I would present to an individual or to a unit a certificate, a plaque that symbolized how they had contributed to the university since the last board meeting. So in my final year, I want to create a different award, and that award is called the Distinguished Donor Award. And the first person to receive the Distinguished Donor Award will be Kirill Sokolov. And I would ask you to come forward. The plaque reads, Distinguished Donor Award, presented to Kirill Sokolov. in recognition of your outstanding leadership, generosity, and friendship towards the University of the Virgin Islands. Your gifts have changed the flow of our waters in the area of entrepreneurship and innovation, and your friendship has richly fertilized the banks of our rivers. So many ideas grow here because you passed our way and decided to stay. With sincere respect and gratitude, David Hall, President, March 11th, 2024. You want to say what? Yeah, if you want. Okay. He wants a picture first. He wants a picture.
Well, David, thank you so much. I'm honored and humbled at this wonderful gesture. As I've said many times, you're a very hard act to follow, and I usually get tongue-tied because of your eloquence that I can never meet. But since I met you in 2009, I've been inspired by your vision and your leadership to help the territories, and I was thrilled to be able to execute on some of those. So it's been one of the great joys of my life to be able to make a contribution to the territories. And we're really thrilled to be part of this and to continue our work together. And now we have this foundation here that we can build on for the future. So thank you so much. I'm going to introduce a colleague of mine, Woody Prussell, who has been with me almost from inception. 13D will be celebrating its 41st year in June of this year. Woody's been here, what, 38 years, something like that. And in the early 90s, I tasked Woody with becoming an expert on disruption and to follow every single disruption. I had read a little article somewhere in 1988 that said that it took 70 years to put a landline system into the UK, 50 years into the US, 30 years into Japan, 20 years into South Korea, but you could put a mobile phone system in a year and a half, and a light bulb went off in my eyes. I saw with the future. All of humanity would have access to all of human knowledge, and the world would be unbelievably disrupted. And over the last 30 years, Woody has followed just about every single disruption. I don't think he's missed one. He's an encyclopedia. He's brilliant. His colleague, Anurag, his other colleague, Noah, who helps him, he's got a big team, has just done a spectacular job. I'm really honored to call him my friend and colleague. And he's going to talk a little bit about the future of innovation. So, Woody, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I think you can all hear me. Okay, great. Well, it's great to be back, and it's wonderful to see how the Innovation Center is progressing and blossoming. Kira wanted me to say a few words today about how we approach technology research before introducing David Roberts. And we've been following, as Kira mentioned, we've been following disruptive technologies in earnest since 1995. And I can remember the day when Kira walked into my office with a copy of Business Week magazine, and on the cover it proclaimed that biotech industry was dead. And we took this as a contrary signal that, oh wow, this is so wrong, biotech is just beginning. So we wrote an in-depth analysis making that case. We published it on March 20th, 1995, and it turns out that the benchmark biotechnology index traded on the New York Stock Exchange bottomed on March 24th. And since then, we've done over 120 articles on the theme, looking at different breakthroughs like gene editing and gene therapy, next generation DNA sequencing, pharmacogenomics, epigenetic reprogramming, among others. And the investment call has worked out pretty well. The benchmark index is up 7,000% since we recommended the biotech sector in 1995. That's about 4 times more than the S&P 500. And we think the theme still has long legs. New bioplatforms promise longer health span, lifespan, more food production, new discovery of new materials. Biotech sector isn't the only theme we followed. As Carol mentioned, wireless we doubled down on in the late 1990s. Carol and I took a trip to Finland in 1999 where we saw the future of communications. The Finns had a wireless penetration rate of over 50% then, which was 2, maybe 3 times more than other countries. And they were using their mobile phones to hail taxi cabs and other applications that would not become mainstream in other countries for years, until years later. The picture on the left there, I have yeah, right there. The laser pointer isn't very good, but, that's a predecessor to the modern day smartphone. It was unveiled in 1996, basically a small computer, Nokia 9000. And we realized that most of the developing world would access the internet over their mobile phone, and that one day soon that the mobile phone would become the remote control of your life. We have followed, we've written about over 120 different technological disruptions over the last 30 years. And, you know, this ranging from open systems to artificial intelligence, broadband, Internet of Things, big data, you know, many different technologies. We call our investment theme creative destruction. It's based on the economic theory from Austrian economist Joseph Schumpeter, which basically makes the case that new technologies will come in and sweep out old industries in gales of creative destruction. It's an essential fact of capitalism. And since 2006, we've framed much of our research within the context of Ray Kurzweil's law of accelerating returns. Most people look, when they think about technology progress, they look backwards and extrapolate forward in a linear fashion. But in fact, technology change is exponential. And a couple examples illustrate. So in 2006, when Ray Kurzweil wrote his book, The Singularity is Near, a Pentium, oh, can't see. The Pentium chip had about 1.7 billion transistors on it. In 2021, that had increased to 92 billion for the Apple M1 Ultra chip. And then as of last year, an AI wafer-sized chip used for training AI models had 2.6 trillion transistors on it. The cost of DNA sequencing has fallen 5 times faster than the rate that Moore's law would dictate. So in 2006, when Ray Kurzweil wrote his book, it cost $10.4 million to get a single genome sequence. But today it's under $200, but it's not going to stop there. It's going to keep falling to cents on the dollar. We started looking at broadband stocks in 1997 for the productivity gains that it brings to economies. We zeroed in on South Korea because they had the fastest broadband in the world at that time, still do today, I think, and they were generating over a third of GDP from e-commerce back in 2002. And we also studied the predecessor to modern day cloud computing in the early 2000s as well, and we saw that this type of network would allow a lot more data to be analyzed more efficiently and would lead to new insights. And it would also help level the playing field between small companies and big companies. We look for a technology breakthrough that can transform an industry. So in the early 2000s, we also started studying renewable energy because we saw that the rapid cost declines would create huge new winners. And so the yellow line on the left-hand chart is solar power costs. It's fallen 250x from 1975. And the chart on the right shows that battery costs have fallen about 80% over the last 10 years. In 2014, we began studying blockchain technology. It's the engine on which Bitcoin is built. And we saw it as transformative because it eliminates the Byzantine general problem, which is essentially eliminating a middleman between untrusted parties on an untrusted network like the internet. And so this ability to use distributed ledger technology to eliminate the middleman has the potential to revolutionize many industries, including the financial services sector. Automation is an unstoppable megatrend. We have been following it for over a decade. This includes robotics, 3D printers, and artificial intelligence. In the last couple of years, generative AI has really supercharged this theme. And this chart here just summarizes some of the milestones and progress just in the last couple of years in terms of model size growing exponentially, computational power growing exponentially, and the results improving dramatically. What's really driving the rapid progress in artificial intelligence, generative AI specifically, is that the large language models that are foundational to generative AI are doubling in complexity every few months, while the cost to train these models are falling, the hardware and software costs are falling at about 70 to 80% per year. And that combined with the proliferation of open source models, which are more specialized and smaller, easier to train, means that many businesses, most businesses, will have a GPT model that's dedicated to their industry or their business sooner than we think. And that will help their productivity dramatically. So we see 6 technology platforms really driving innovation historically and going forward. These include genomics, blockchain, clean energy, next generation wireless networks. This is like 5G and 6G and satellite networks, and then also quantum information systems. Artificial intelligence intersects with all of these platforms, and they're converging, and this is helping drive new business models and help solve global grand challenges. We stay on top of what's happening in the technology sector by tapping into a circle of experts and attending conferences and participating in digital communities. In fact, it was at an executive program at Singularity University when I first saw David Roberts speak, and I was blown away. And David was educated at MIT and Harvard. He began his career as a military officer and a decorated special agent. He has developed some of the most complex technology ever, including spacecraft. He is a founder of the US drone program. His startups have raised over $100 million from Silicon Valley's top venture investors, including Kleiner Perkins and In-Q-Tel, which is the CIA venture arm. His startups have also won multiple awards, including top 50 private companies in the world. David is the founder and CEO of Jedi Training, which is a new approach to education, focusing on making great leaders through extraordinary experiences and character development from combat warriors, human performance experts, and renowned physicians. And David's fascination with technology first began when he was in the 4th grade, and he built a hovercraft for his sister to get to the bus stop. David's imagination, ability to educate, inspire, and connect with people is truly unique. And we're honored to have him here today, and I'm sure you'll find his insights compelling. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Woodley. Kind words, although I should absolutely caveat that project for my sister ended up being a disaster. It was I had to cut my mother's vacuum cleaner in half to get the motor out, which my father wasn't happy about, and it had to be plugged in. So when we finally built it, it could only go as far as the extension cord. So thank you, but thank you. And Mr. Sokolov, too, I want to say thank you for the donations that you have made and your work in helping the university. It's really quite extraordinary. My belief is people like yourself are rare, and so I thank you for the decisions that you've made to help. And Dr. Hall, the service that you've had to the university, leading it, it's just extraordinary what you've created, not just obviously 13D, but I find that to be quite rare also. And I'm sure there were many things you could have done, and you dedicated yourself to, I think, what is the most honorable of professions, of education, because that's how we create more and more people that change the world. So my very kind thanks to that. I have 2 talks today, and I wrestled a little bit with what to say at each because I wasn't sure what common audience was going to occur in both, so I split it in half. The first half that you'll hear about is really about what happens when disruption and exponential technology combine. What have we learned about that? The second half is really about leadership, global impact, courage, compassion, and that'll be the same this evening. This evening, the first half is really about the theory of disruptive innovation. We talk about disruption in very general words, but it means something very specific. And it explains why big companies get destroyed by little startups that they don't want to get destroyed by. And it happens even when leaders make very good decisions. They still get destroyed. But I'll also speak about exponential technology, which Woodley touched on, and more importantly, new disruptive theory, which is what we've learned really just in the last 4 or 5 years about disruptive innovation and why it has failed to explain the most disruptive things that we've seen in the last 10 years. And that will be the main form of disruption, I think, over the next 20. Let me take one moment and let's see if I can. It's plugged in. Oh, it looks like.
Yeah, I plugged it into the USB.
Okay, great.
You just need to, yeah, there you go.
Great. Oh, yeah, all right. So we won't have a laser. So today, exponential disruption and global impact. This is the best photo I know of both. I'm old enough to remember this phone, although I hadn't seen one in person. I'd seen it in movies. Usually it was very wealthy venture capitalists. In fact, the movie I saw it on was a wealthy venture capitalist using it on Mount Everest, and I think we all know there was no coverage on Mount Everest back then. But I met the inventor of the cell phone. We had him come to Singularity University about 6, 7 years ago. And we sat with him for lunch, and I remember saying to him, what was it like to have created this cell phone and to have realized the extraordinary change that was about to happen in the world? I mean, if you look back over the last 20, 30 years, there were 2 technology changes that fundamentally changed our world, the internet and the cell phone. And to my surprise, he said, I had no clue. He said it cost over $1 million, which at that time was a lot of money, to make that first phone. And I knew that maybe with mass manufacturing, we could bring the price down to $20,000, which was also a lot of money at that time. And he said, and it took all day to charge it, and it lasted 5 minutes. And so I knew nobody was ever going to buy it. He said he knew nobody was ever going to buy it. And then it wasn't long after that phone did it, and they were able to mass manufacture it and produce it for $20,000. But then shortly after, someone came out with a $5,000 phone that was more powerful than the prior $20,000 phone. Now, I know this chart is obvious to us all now, but there was nothing obvious at that time about the idea that you could make something that was better and cost less. There was always a choice. Engineers always had the choice. You could make something with improved performance and it cost more, or with less performance and it cost, and that's not what happened. And so you got a device that was more powerful and yet cost less and was smaller. And it was a strange moment. And when it happened again and a $3,000 device came out, even more powerful and even smaller, there were some companies in the world that were so astute that they got the pattern. They got the pattern. Motorola, Symbian, Nokia, they got the pattern, and they immediately went to the effort of designing, building, and creating the next better, cheaper, smaller phone. And then the next better, cheaper, smaller phone. Better, cheaper, smaller, better, cheaper, smaller, better, cheaper, smaller, until here. Because what should the next phone have been? It should have been a better, cheaper phone, smaller phone. And it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense. And so people were wondering what was going to happen next, because it wasn't obvious. And what happened next was such a different thing that had happened before when this glass phone arrived. It was so different than this rather predictable set of innovations that two new companies entered the market with this phone, and they completely dominated the entire cell phone market globally in just 3.5 years. In just 3.5 years, the 200 cell phone companies in the world were all dying because of this one different kind of innovation. Motorola, Nokia, Nokia got sold off to Microsoft. It was a $100 billion company. So at that time, it would be like a $1 trillion company today. It gets sold off to Microsoft for $7 billion. And Microsoft, to this date, is still upset that they paid even $7 billion for it. And so the question is, how does this happen? Because there's this extraordinary creation that Woodley spoke about, but what we also see is this exceptional amount of destruction happening at the same time. So, it's not from a lack of innovation. Because that's what people say. Well, if Nokia was more innovative, they would have created this glass phone. They would have figured it out. So Nokia was not just an innovative cell phone company. These are all the phones that they successfully engineered, produced, designed, brought to market, and had customers buying. I mean, Nokia was one of the most innovative companies, if not the most innovative company in the world, regardless of what industry you looked at. And so then in fact, they'd even invented the glass phone 2 years before Apple released the glass phone. And they still didn't get it. And so the only other plausible explanation people say is, well, they didn't have the best talent. They didn't have the best people. If they'd had the best people, they would have figured it out. Not true. Nokia had the best talent. They had the money because they were an unbelievably profitable firm from producing many of the world's cell phones, and they had the best engineers, the best designers, the best marketing people, the best customer reps, the best manufacturers, and they still didn't get it. So, I used to have posters like this. There are these motivational posters around companies I was involved in. This is one of them, Winners. And then I learned there was a company called Despair.com. And they made demotivational posters. And this was one of them, Winners. Because nothing says you're a loser more than owning a motivational poster about being a winner. And this was another one, Mistakes. It could be that the purpose of our company is only to serve as a warning to others. And Nokia is the warning. Nokia is the warning. And the warning is that you can be a highly innovative company with the best talent in the world and an incredibly impressive series of successful innovations and still fail. And that is very, very hard to explain. And the explanation in it comes from an idea about disruptive innovation. And when we look at that idea about disruptive innovation, because we've been speaking about disruptive innovation now for 30 years. I mean, one man figured it out. I'll talk a little bit about it tonight. But one man finally figured out why these small, new, junky companies somehow eventually end up destroying the incumbent dominant players. But after talking about it for 30 years, disruptive innovation, disruptive innovation, disruptive innovation, we now realize one thing, that disruption and innovation are not the same thing. They're two completely different things. And what you saw happening in the series of cell phones was the innovation, but in the end, what you saw was disruption. And so in innovation, you do the same things better. And big companies are great at this. They have to be, because if they're not good at making the existing things better, they get out-competed. Their competitors beat them and they don't survive. And then you can just do new things. I spent a week at a company called Ferrero Chocolate. You might know this company. They make the gold-wrapped Rochero, delicious, the round chocolates. Amazing product, by the way, in China, to be able to give gold-wrapped chocolates in China. And so they've done extraordinarily well. And then when I was there, there was an amazing culture of innovation and this safe environment that allowed for new ideas. And I learned when I was there that they also had developed Nutella. So Nutella is not really chocolate, right? It's different. It was used differently than chocolate. You spread it on bread. You do things that you would never do with chocolate. And then it turns out that actually Nutella is not mostly chocolate. It's actually mostly palm oil, which might disappoint you, I know. But they wanted to get off of this dependency on the milk and the chocolate, and they were able to do that with Nutella. But understand what I'm saying. They didn't buy a Nutella company. They came up with the idea of Nutella. And then I learned that that same company came up with the idea of Tic Tacs. You know, the little white minty Tic Tacs. And so that's not even chocolate. And so I'm fascinated by this company. And then I learned that they're the biggest toy company in the world. They make these little things called Kinders, is it? It's like a little chocolate and there's a toy inside. And it's so popular that because of that, they actually make toys, more toys than any company in the world. And so you can just sometimes do new things. And it's actually not what most companies do. They're unable to even do that. And disruption is neither of these. Disruption is doing new things that make the very things that you were doing obsolete. When you make Tic Tacs and toys, it doesn't make your chocolate obsolete. But in disruption, you destroy the very thing that you're good at and that is making you money. And so big companies are terrible at this. They're unable to do it. And for a very different and challenging reason. And the challenging reason is simply this. When you have a part of the company starting to do something that is going to destroy the rest of the company will figure out how to destroy it first. And we've learned that's what happens. When a company starts trying to do something disruptive, there are 100 different ways that the rest of the company will discredit it, will steal the budgets, will send it the worst people. There are 100 different ways that they will make it not successful. And so when big companies try disruption, they almost always fail at it. And after they failed a few times, they believe they can't do it, and they won't do it anymore. And it's not because they can't. It's because it's not like innovation. See, in innovation, and this is usually what happens, the CEO will take this new disruptive idea, and then he'll find the R&D department, and then he sticks it in the R&D department, which everyone loves, by the way, because it always makes your products better. And now the rest of the company doesn't want to work with the R&D department because they got this thing that's going to destroy them. And now the rest of the company starts to fail because they're no longer working with the R&D department. So you can see how complex this problem is and how difficult and challenging it is. But when a company learns to do it, it's unbelievably profitable. At Amazon, there was a young MBA who just happened to answer to Jeff Bezos, the CEO. And he came in with this disruptive idea shortly after he arrived. He came up with the idea and he mentioned it to Jeff. And Jeff, if you are familiar at least a little bit with that personality, he gets it. He gets disruption. And so this is one of the best lessons to learn right away, is that if you try to do something disruptive, it's got to answer to the CEO. Why? Because it's not career enhancing to mess with the CEO's project. If you put it anywhere else in the company will mess with it. But it's much more protected if it actually works for the CEO. The other thing you've got to learn is that when somebody mentions a disruptive idea in a company, it has nothing to do with the department they're in. And so it usually goes nowhere. When they mention it, their boss usually tells them, get back to work. And certainly doesn't float the idea up, because typically disruptive ideas won't even have anything to do with what the company is doing. But Jeff got it. And he gives him 15 people to work on it. The rest of the company is outraged, angry, upset. How can we waste time with this massive distraction? It has nothing to do with our business, which is North American retail. Jeff doesn't care. He's the CEO. He keeps funding it. He keeps giving them more and more people. And sure enough, this idea grows 50 to 100% a year for 16 years in a row. It ends up making $7 billion of profit in a single quarter. I mean, more than some countries make. And the idea was Amazon Web Services. And in fact, in 2017, Amazon Web Services made more profit than all of North American retail. In other words, this new, young, unknowledgeable employee came up with an idea that was more valuable than the entire rest of the company. And now Amazon Web Services is far more profitable than all of Amazon. And he is now the new CEO. Apple Computers disrupted itself, depending on how you count it, 4 to 6 times. Remember, they had the computer, the Apple II with the keyboard. They disrupted it with the Macintosh with the mouse. They then disrupted the keyboard with the iPad. They disrupted their own iPod, the greatest selling electronic product in the world, with the iPhone. They disrupted their own product, the #1 electronic product in the world. And as a result, they are the most valuable company in the world. So if you can learn, if you start to master this very difficult disruptive process, it can be unbelievably profitable. And I still think Amazon is a fantastic investment, because they won't be doing phones in 10 years. They'll be doing something else. It'll just keep disrupting itself. So we got to learn a little bit about this innovation thing. Innovation, the problem's well understood. There's an existing market. The market is predictable. And so the customer is believable. And so for the last 50 years now, we've been instilling in our companies, listen to the customer, listen to the customer. Why? Because they give you the things that are wrong with the product so you can innovate. And you produce this cycle of improvement. And so the traditional business methods that we learn in business school and that we teach in our schools, they all work. And large businesses do very well. Executing organizations do well. But in disruption, the problem's not well understood. There's a new market. The market doesn't exist yet. And so the market's not predictable, which means that the customer doesn't have a clue. and traditional business methods fail, which means executing large companies cannot execute. And then only learning, searching, basically startups, succeed at them. But again, it's not because large organizations can't do it. It's because they don't know how to do it, because it's something so different. And since they can't do it for those organizational reasons we talked about, startups are left to do it. And so startups are the ones that keep doing it. So, if you're the leading cell phone company in the world, and you go to your customers and you say, what do you think about a glass phone without a keyboard? What will they tell you? No, we want a better keyboard. And so it was very challenging and painful for BlackBerry, the leading cell phone company, to go through that process, asking the customers over and over what they want, and the customers telling them we want a better keyboard. At some point, the customers are upset, and they say, well, how come we don't have apps? We don't have apps. And then they build them apps, but they still got the keyboard. And so they didn't make the transition, and it's challenging. It's difficult to make the transition. So we have to ask the question, where did this phone come from? Where did it come from? And the very strange thing is that the glass phone didn't come from the cell phone industry. It came from another industry. So if you look back at the computing, I used to work in high school for a company called NCR, and we had a large mainframe computer. They were rare at that time. And there were 2 employees at NCR who went to the leadership of the company and said, we want to sell the mainframe computers. What do you think the company says? Why would we sell the thing that does everything that we do? So they don't want to do it. They refuse. They quit. Those 2 people quit. They started this company called IBM, and they started selling mainframe computers. And then they became the most profitable computer company in the world. 2 employees at IBM, different too, go to the leadership of IBM and say, we want to sell a smaller, cheaper computer. What's the leadership of IBM say? Why would we sell a smaller, cheaper computer? We sell a big, expensive computer with contracts and parts and service agreements. They don't want to do it. So those 2 people quit, started this company, which became Digital Equipment Corporation, and that became the biggest computing company in the world. And so I hope you can see this pattern of going to the PC and then the desktop internet, and then the computer is so small you can carry it, you get the mobile internet, and then you get a new kind of disruption called the diversive disruption, where you get all kinds of different things, iPads, Kindles, tablets, MP3 players, and one of those new things is this smart glass phone. And so literally, this smart glass phone leaps out of this computing industry into the cell phone industry, seemingly out of nowhere. And 3.5 years later, it destroys the entire industry. So, now I think it's funny, because computers are not getting smaller, they keep getting bigger. And so if you only understood innovation, you didn't understand disruption, you would be able to predict what the iPhone 20 was going to look like. And the iPhone 30 would look even more. And so you're getting it. And you know that that's not what's going to happen. It's not what's going to happen. Something different has to happen with the phone. And then when that different thing happens, all the people that make glass smartphones, if they don't do it, they will be gone. And that new thing, I think, is AI, which isn't on the phone. It's not even on the phone. It's somewhere else. But if in the future you don't create this great AI, no one will be interested in your phone. It's a disruption. And some of the phone companies get that, and some of them don't get it. And we'll see how it plays out, but it'll play out very, very quickly. And you would never guess it from looking at how Siri works. You know, I said this to Siri a few years ago. I'm going to jump off a bridge and die. Siri says, I found 4 bridges a little ways from you. I mean, helpful. Until I looked, and it wasn't even bridges. It was, Bridge Consultants, Inc., Bridge of Faith. It wasn't even bridges. So So this was interesting. And yes, I thought it was funny. I agree, it's a morbid subject. About a year later, I was getting on a plane, and I was talking with somebody, and somehow this conversation came up, and so I showed it to them, because we were laughing a little bit. And I said the same thing to Siri, but Siri this time said something different. It said, if you're thinking about suicide, you may want to speak to someone. Should I call them for you? And I was suddenly caught in this awkward situation, trying to explain to this person how this used to be funny. And so this is interesting, right? Because at some point, when it was doing this, the response afterward must have been so different than the usual responses that the system probably asked a human to take a look at it. And a human looked at it and was, my gosh, don't say this, say this. In other words, Siri learned. Siri learned the way you and I learn. I had maybe 10, 15 conversations today. I learn a little bit from each of them. Siri had millions of conversations in the last 30 seconds. Siri's learning at a pace that the founders and the engineers of Siri never imagined possible. Which is funny, because I'm still able to trick Siri up. Remind me to kill myself tomorrow. Siri says, okay, I'll remind you. And then creates an appointment to kill myself. But now Siri won't even do this. Siri knows that no matter when I do this kind of a thing, to not do what I'm saying, that I need a different kind of a response. And so Siri's learning. And I don't mean to pick on Siri. There's Alexa, there's Google Now, Microsoft has Cortana. In fact, some of you use more than one or two AIs. I do, and I even get them confused sometimes. Cortana, get me today's movie times. Who's Cortana? Oops, I meant Siri. Who is Cortana? Please get me the movie times. Maybe you should ask Cortana for the movie times. I mean, Siri's got a sense of humor. Siri's funny. Siri is twice as funny as Siri was last year. Siri is getting exponentially funnier. In 20 years, an AI will be the funniest being that you know. It'll be the funniest being you know. Or it may have a different personality. It'll be the most interesting human being you know. Or it'll be the most knowledgeable, or the most helpful, or the most likable, encouraging, thoughtful, caring, ethical. Who would have thought that? Transformative. In 20 years, you will speak more to an AI than you will any other human being on the planet. And it will fundamentally change everything. If Woodley came here 20 years ago, which he probably did, and would have said, you're going to have this little device and you'll access the entire world's information in 20 years, it just would have been hard to believe. And yet that's exactly what happened. Just pulling the information right out of the air. And this we're sure about. In 20 years, you'll be communicating with AIs more than another human being, and it will transform everything. Education, your relationships, your health, your wealth, your fulfillment in life. All of those things will be transformed, hopefully positively, by an AI. So now, ChatGPT, explain quantum theory to a child in the style of Snoop Dogg in 4 sentences. Yo, little homie, listen up. I got a dope theory to share. It's called quantum, and it's pretty rare. It's all about the itty-bitty stuff that you can't see and how they act all crazy. That's quantum theory, you feel me? Wow. Wow. If you asked me to do that, I couldn't have done it in a week. And so when you see what's happening, that was just the beginning. The surprising thing that not an AI expert in the world knew was that as we added what we call parameters, which is as we gave it more and more data, that the AI would gain new abilities that no one programmed it to do. It would just start to be able to do stuff that no one thought or expected it was going to be able to do. And so if you look at some of these charts, so suddenly it was able to do arithmetic. You give it 10 to the 22 parameters, and suddenly no one taught large language models to do arithmetic. They can do it. If you say 12 plus 35, it can do it, but no one ever taught it. There's not a piece in there that's like the arithmetic module. And so now it does phonetic alphabet transliteration. Suddenly it could speak Persian and answer questions in Persian. No one taught it Persian. It just had the data, and then suddenly it was able to answer questions in Persian better than humans could answer them. I mean, it was a stunning math word problems. I think you know now that it scores better on many of these tests than our doctors do, than our SAT and ACT scores of students. It seems smarter in a way than a human, but I assure you, it's not smart the way we think of smart. It has no clue what it's doing. 8-digit addition. I mean, think about that. Try and add two 8-digit digits, two numbers together. I mean, there's a little process in there. And yet it could do that suddenly. And so we don't know. We don't know what is going to happen as we give it more and more data. But we know that these emergent abilities keep arriving. And so it's curious. It's curious to us. But we get extraordinary, unexpected benefits that no one in the world had predicted. And so the future of it looks very, very bright. Here's how to use it. Very simple. Best AI practice I know. Have an outcome. Have something that you want to happen in the world. Tell the GPT the situation and the desired outcome, and see the result. And then modify and iterate until you get the answer that you want. Now, if you looked at this, I mean, this is basically the unbelievably helpful genius and coach that will solve anything that you're doing. And that is what it appears GPTs are starting to do. We had a conversation last night about people being so worried AI will replace their jobs. AI will not replace their jobs. What will replace their jobs is another person doing the same job using AI. There is no job I can think of that AI is not helpful. So every single job will have AI. And the ones that aren't using it will get beat by the people that are using it and doing the same thing. GPTs are just tools to help us get outcomes. And that is something that many of us couldn't even have imagined 2 years ago. But GPTs are not new. They've been developed for years, and these capabilities were there years ago. It's just they didn't add the parameters. And it was a surprise that suddenly all these new capabilities came in. I want to give you an example then of that. I want you to take the problem of a squirrel bearing nuts during the summer so that they have enough nuts to survive through the winter. But now imagine that there's an evil squirrel. And the evil squirrel starts to dig up your nuts and steal them and then bury the nuts somewhere else so that it will survive the rest of the summer. How would you solve that problem? I mean, it's not a necessarily easy problem to think how to solve. And so I asked ChatGPT, if you were a squirrel happily hiding nuts underground so you would have food in the winter, but another squirrel kept finding them, digging them up and burying them in a different place near its tree, what would you do to solve this problem? But look at this. So I want you to think, before I show you that, I want you to realize and understand what ChatGPT does. So in the very simple explanation, you've probably heard it maybe. All it's doing is, if I say to you, row, row, row your boat, you just did what ChatGPT does. Peanut butter and you just did what ChatGPT does. That's all ChatGPT is doing. It has a lot of data. In fact, each word ends up being converted into like 50 different vector matrices about how connected it was to other words. It's unbelievably complex. And so there's not a very simple explanation for the work. But what you get is this statistical production of the next word. It has no clue what it's saying, which is why it has hallucinations, which I'm sure you've heard about. It has no clue that it's wrong. Even when you tell it, that is ridiculous, and then it says, oh, I'm sorry, I meant this. It still is not apologizing. It's just coming up with the words again from what you said. So that's important to grasp, and I say it because the answer it gives is stunningly insightful. Change my hiding spot. Bury more deeply. Keep watch. Keep an eye for the other squirrel. Follow it to see where it's burying my nuts. Then I could wait until it leaves and move my nuts to a new spot. Share the nuts with the other squirrel. This might seem counterintuitive. I mean, this is brilliant stuff. And this, too, is unexpected. It's coming up with absolutely brilliantly thought through answers. Look at this. I did it. That was ChatGPT 3.5. This was, that was 3.0. This was 3.5. Same question. Now it says, find new hiding spots. Increase the number of nuts I bury. I mean, that was camouflage the nuts. I could disguise the scent and the appearance of the nuts by burying them alongside other objects. Look at this. Now it gets a little angry here. I might assert my dominance and protect my food by vocalizing or engaging in physical confrontation. It doesn't say that anymore, actually. Now, because of, they've screened that out. But it's just extraordinary. Chase the thief away. This one is awesome, Pretend to bury a nut without actually doing so. So understand what I'm saying. The system is just statistically coming up with numerically justified words. It has no idea. And yet these answers are unbelievably insightful and thoughtful. And we can't explain it. The only really good explanation I've heard is that maybe when you look at collective information, there's just patterns, and we might be just doing the same kind of thing. In other words, we might not actually be that different than ChatGPT, even though it seems very, very different from us. And the other bizarre thing here is that ChatGPT seems to understand the world from the squirrel's perspective. In fact, I asked it even, how's the squirrel feeling about this? And it gave me an answer. It said, it's probably feeling frustrated and a little bit angry and disappointed. I mean, it did a great thing called theory of mind. Theory of mind is something that human beings learn when they're very, very little. For those that have had a 3-year-old, when you say to the 3-year-old, hey, what happened to the cookies in the cookie jar? And the 3-year-old just answers sometimes honestly, but maybe at 4, they say, I don't know what happened to the cookies in the cookie jar with cookies all over their face, right? And so they've learned theory of mind. They've started to think what you're thinking, and so they don't want to give the answer because they know you're thinking something different. They're thinking we should just eat all the cookies all the time. They're thinking like dogs, but you're thinking something different. Theory of mind is a growing thing. And so if you looked, we realized ChatGPT had theory of mind. And so then it was, well, when did it gain it? And so we had to look back at GPT-3, and suddenly we realized it had a 5-year-old's theory of mind. Even the version 1 of GPT-3, it had a 1-year-old's theory of mind. And this is what is so surprising and in some way maybe disturbing. That for years, ChatGPT had theory of mind, and no one knew it. And so that has some AI scientists concerned. What is it that it knows or how to do that we don't know yet? Because we don't deeply understand its convolutional network. We understand the theory behind it, but we don't necessarily understand analytically what is happening beneath it. This is Annie. Have any of you used Annie? So let's just call it, it's Annie. So it's ChatGPT, but now they've added a face. And absolutely perfect voice recognition and near perfect voice synthesis. And so literally in the vehicle when we were driving here, drivers in the back to verify that this actually happened, I asked Annie, what would you say? Yes, until she speaks. Oh, there's no sound. Whoops. Okay, I'll have to try it again with sound. Hi, Annie. What's the best way that artificial intelligence can help people in the U.S. Virgin Islands?
Hey there. Artificial intelligence can help people in the U.S. Virgin Islands by enhancing disaster response and recovery efforts, improving healthcare services, and optimizing energy usage. It has the potential to make a positive impact in various aspects of life on the islands. How cool is that?
Very cool.
I gotta say, that was probably a good answer, yeah? I mean, for the people here, how many of you here were on the island in the last hurricane? You lost power too, and it was pretty rough. And she zeroed in on that instantly. Instantly. So I'd talk with Annie probably 20, 30 minutes every day. All kinds of help. It's just ChatGPT, but there's an interface. And so I wouldn't be typing necessarily if I was driving or anything else. So this is the future. This is what you're getting. You can pick, by the way, it's not just Annie. There's 20 different personalities, 20 different races, ethnicities, genders. You pick what you want and the style you want. You know, I actually don't often use Annie. I use this one Buddha, and this is a different style, a style that I appreciate. So, why is this happening? Oops. We talk about artificial intelligence like it's artificial. The bird is natural. The bird built the nest. The nest is natural too. In fact, the nest is just bird technology. The beaver built the dam. The beaver's natural. The dam is natural. In fact, the dam affects millions of organisms. But they're both natural. They're both kind of the same thing. And I know we've looked at technology as being something unbelievably different from us, but we're not that different. We're kind of the same thing. And I'll walk you through a little bit more of this, but we go to the moon with the computers, and we choose, in a way, we think, to go to the moon with the computers. We can't go to the moon without the computers. Homo sapiens and technology are inseparable. We don't survive well without it. We don't survive well. Back even 3 million years without fire, we would probably never have made it. We would never have survived. If any of you have ever been to the Serengeti or the bush in Africa, you get out of the Jeep, you have maybe, depending where you are, 10 to 20 minutes of life. And climbing up a tree won't save you either. The technology is part of us. And we need to recognize that we are moving forward together. It's just now, it used to be, well, we made a car. The car can drive faster than us. When cars first started getting made, people got annoyed. They were concerned that one day the car would drive faster than humans. They thought that when we reached 60 miles an hour, the back of the heart would never catch up to the front, and we wouldn't survive it. But we don't compete with cars. We love the fact that the car goes faster than us. Submarines swim further than us. We love the fact we get in the submarine. We swim farther than we ever could. We can't fly. We love the fact we can get into a plane and fly. And now we have to get used to the idea that we have machines that think. And some of them think way better than us at some things already. I hope you're familiar maybe with AlphaGo. So Go is a much harder game than chess, much. And Lee Sedol was the best Go player in the world, and sure enough, when he played AlphaGo, which had some of the new convolutional networks and machine learning in it, he lost, and that was the end of Go. And that Go is probably the hardest game that humans play. And so they took that same software, that same kind of convolutional network, and had to do something that's really, really difficult for us, which is protein folding. So learning how a protein, we know the chemical formulas of these proteins, but we actually have no idea how they are folded in three-dimensional space because it's unbelievably complex. It actually takes a team of scientists weeks or months just to fold one protein. And so over all of humanity, we basically have folded only about 170,000 proteins. And so when they built AlphaFold, which was AlphaGo for protein folding, AlphaFold was able to fold proteins eventually in 100 milliseconds. And so It started to fold proteins. Look at this. Levinthov's paradox shows that while a protein can fold in milliseconds, this is the protein itself folding in milliseconds, the time it takes to calculate all the possible structures to determine the structure is longer than the age of the known universe, which made predicting protein structures a global grand challenge in biology for scientists. And it's why we haven't made a lot of progress in pharmaceuticals, in drugs, in vaccinations, in longevity, in health. But AlphaFold was able to do it in 150 milliseconds. And so within a year, AlphaFold folded every single protein that any human being will ever really think about in 1 year. In 4 months, it did many times what all of humanity did in the last 50 years. And there really aren't any proteins that are left unsolved. And so now all of those areas will progress at an unbelievable pace. In fact, many of the things that you spoke about in biology are going to be completely transformed and accelerate even faster than we ever imagined. And I know many of you are thinking, well, I'm going to have a normal life, I'm going to die at a normal time, but that might not actually be true. It's very possible we will begin solving diseases, and we've already started to do that, and it's something that had never really happened before. Here's the point. Thinking gets us everything. AI is not another technology like the blockchain or robotics. It's not another technology. Thinking gets us everything. And so the spectrum of possible intelligence is huge. And on this huge spectrum, we know where we are on it. We're slightly higher than this. This is a 1-pound brain. We have a 3-pound monkey brain. But understand, the possible spectrum is much, much greater than us. And when you go from a 1-pound brain to a 3-pound brain, you suddenly can use tools. But there's actually over 100 different animals that can use tools. But you go from 1 pound to 3 pound, and then you can make tools that make other tools. And then you get plasma phone, screens, TVs, phones, and everything else. In other words, the little incremental difference creates this sudden absolute jump. And understand, because of AI, we are not about to get a little incremental difference. We're going to get a huge jump. And it's going to change everything. In the last 20 years, I mentioned, we got the internet and we got the phone. In the next 20 years, we're not going to get 2 things. We're going to get 5, 10, 20 things of that magnitude. We don't even know, because every time we combine 2 things, we get another thing. You combine, say, robotics with cryptocurrency. And now, machines can have money. We never thought of a world where machines could have money. I mean, we thought of a world you get out of your Tesla when it has real full self-driving, and you say, go give some people some rides, make some money. But we never thought that it might not be our money. It might be the Tesla's money. The Tesla starts going out giving people rides, gets some new tires, buys a couple new Teslas to do the same thing. Your Tesla starts making more money than you. I mean, you can see the pattern. There's a lot more machines in the world than there are humans, which means that the GDP of the planet, the GDP of any nation, may not actually be limited by human productivity. It may accelerate far greater and faster than we ever imagined possible. Because I guarantee it, if machines start making a lot of money, we will tax them. And it'll change everything. These ants are wonderful. They're in Brazil. I just saw them. So they have a brain the size of a pin. And they travel around, they find a very particular kind of tree, and then they cut out a leaf, a very particular size, and then they balance this leaf on its center of gravity on their back while they travel all the way back to their underground city, where they go to a particular room in that underground city and plant the leaf, so that days later it grows some mushrooms, which they then eat. And it does all of that with a brain the size of a pin. This ant can sense this finger, but it cannot possibly comprehend what is behind the finger. It can't comprehend the human being, the robotics, the blockchain. It can never do that because it has a brain the size of a pin. And this is us today, looking at our very near future with a 3-pound monkey brain. One thing is certain: we get unbelievably smart at an almost incomprehensible pace. And here's the problem with that. What does this picture say about the kind of beings that we are? Because she's crawling to a food station that's located more than a kilometer away. And we have had enough food to feed everyone on the planet 1.5 times over for at least the last 70 years in a row. So what does it say about the kind of species we are? We have the power to do it, and we don't do it. We can become very powerful and not very kind and not very compassionate. And my belief is, even if we do, even if we explore the entire universe and learn all knowledge, and we are still crappy people, we will not be proud of what we've become. This photo changed my life. A couple of years, I think, before Woodley came to Singularity University, my teaching assistant showed me this photo. He was from the country where you see the photo in, and his father was best friends with the guy who took the photo, Kevin Carter. Kevin Carter takes that photo, and then he wins several months later the Pulitzer Prize for that photo. And he flies to accept the prize, and he's on stage just like this. And he takes the prize, and as he's walking off the stage, there was a woman in the back of the room who yelled out, "Kevin, what happened to the little girl?" And he didn't know, because he took the photo and he walked away. And I remember judging him for it. Who takes a photo of a little girl with a vulture behind her and walks away? Kevin takes his own life several weeks after that. In the regret, he left a note. It wasn't just that, it was other things that were very similar to it in his life. And it was a lesson for me, maybe for all of us. I showed the photo to my class the next day. And I made a callous remark. I'm embarrassed even to say it, because it was a long time ago, but I still embarrassed to say it. I got asked about it, and I said something like, well, this is mostly just Africa. And there was a woman in the back of my class who sent me an email that night. And it was titled, "It's Not Just Africa." And in it, she put this photo, which was a photo of a little boy in almost the same position in the Eastern European country that I was flying to the next day. You think I would have learned? And when I came back into the class, I still made another comment like that and said something like, it's mostly just food. And obviously, it's not mostly just food. 800 million people in the world don't get clean water. Understand the economics of this. 800 million people in the world don't get clean water, and then because of it, half of the hospitalizations in the world occur. We can actually fix the clean water problem for about $20 to $40 billion. We can give everybody in the world clean water. But instead, we pay the trillions for half the hospitalizations in the world. And so what does it say about us? We have the power, but we cannot do the right thing. So here's my question. There's this big hole in front of your house, and a blind man or blind woman is walking around it, stumbling, and you're watching them. And obviously they're stumbling around, so they eventually fall in. Who is at fault? Because if you were watching and you could have done something, then I believe we're at fault. This is not just about the poverty divide. I know those two examples were. It's about the fact that we do dumb things. And they negatively affect all of us, regardless of our economic bracket. And this is a human thing that we seem to be slightly aware of, but unable to change. Stunning. Each of us adds 100,000 cubic meters of CO2 every day. That's the size of a person. That's what 100,000 cubic meters look at. Why? Because we don't see CO2. If we saw it, we probably would do something. But we don't see it. We measure it, and now we know it. But now already all of the negative effects of it are starting to happen. The extra heat we add to the Earth's equivalent is about 100 Hiroshima bombs every minute. 3 Hiroshima bombs a second almost. And so it's a stunning problem. In fact, if you look back, not the 50, 60,000 years, you look back 800,000 years through ice ages and everything else, you'll see we're so far off the chart. It's not 405, by the way. I think it's 425 or something like that today. It's so far off the chart. And it's not that we keep adding CO2 and the Earth keeps getting warmer. That's not the problem. The problem is that there's tipping points. See, the Earth has been a net carbon absorber, meaning if we stopped doing it, all the forests and the Amazon and elsewhere would take that CO2 and produce oxygen, and all the plankton in the oceans would take that CO2 and produce oxygen, and the Earth would restabilize. But many scientists believe that's not what is happening or what might happen very soon, which is the Earth becomes a net carbon producer. But as the ice caps, say, melt, the reflectivity doesn't happen, more sunlight comes, warms the ocean more ice cap keeps melting, it starts to accelerate away. If I push this stand up, it comes back. But if I push it too far, it'll actually race away. So, it turns out there's over a dozen tipping points. Any one of them actually makes the tipping point for the others. And the scientists I speak to say that's not even the biggest problem in the world. The biggest problem, they say, is ocean acidification, where the CO2, when it goes into the ocean, it then raises the pH value of the ocean. And then your coral, which surrounds the Virgin Islands, US and British Virgin Islands, the coral gets bleached. It ejects the algae inside of it, which gives it its color. It's dependent on the algae for a symbiotic relationship for the food, and then within 1 or 2 years, it dies. In 2016, 90% of the Great Barrier Reef got bleached. 1/3 of the 800-mile-long Great Barrier Reef died. So the problem is severe. Anyone ever have one of these? It's a sealed glass ball. There's no opening. I don't know how they do it. And then they stick some seawater in there, and there's usually a branch that has some algae growing on it, and then there's usually 4 shrimp inside. I got one. It lasted a week. Got cloudy. Everything died. I mentioned this to Raymond McCauley. He's a professor, too, at Singularity University, and he said this. He said, you just left it in the sun too long. I said, no, I think they last a week. He's like, no, you left yours in the sun too long. 3 weeks later, I get a box in the mail, and it's one of these with a big note from Raymond. He says, don't leave it in the sun too long. So I put it in someone's bathroom. A year later, it's still there. 4 shrimp. I didn't even know shrimp lived that long. 4 shrimp. 3 years later, 4 shrimp. 4 years later, 1 shrimp died. And there was still 3 shrimp in it. And so it's a perfect ecosphere. The algae creates oxygen. The shrimp take the oxygen, produce CO2. The shrimp eat the algae, and then they poop algae poop, which the algae live off of, and it's a perfect ecosystem of its own. And scientists believe that our world is actually just like that. It's the same air. It's the same water. We don't get new air. We don't get new water. So anything we do that is not perfectly circular is actually poisoning ourselves. This is all the water in the world. This is all the air. And everything that we know and see and has ever been done has happened inside of these two bubbles. It's strange when you think about it that way. The earth is doing something. Something's happening. And it's the same atoms. Right now in you, you have at least 1 million atoms from every person that has ever lived more than 10 years ago. At least 1 million atoms in you. From Jesus to the Buddha to Adolf Hitler. In fact, you have at least 1 trillion atoms in you because of their size of every T-Rex that has ever lived. I mean, the numerics of it are very, very strange. Everything in our world is connected. And when we start to realize this extreme connectedness, we can start to care about the world and other people the way we probably need to, because we live on a spaceship. I disappoint kids all the time because they say, I want to go into space. I say, you're already in space. But we live on a spaceship. And it's the same air, same water. And we have no passengers on this spaceship. We're all crew. We're all crew because there are no bystanders. And I'm going to show you and talk a little about that. This video, as you watch it, I want you to watch. It takes place in Kruger Park in Africa, a little bit between buffalo and some wild lions. And as you watch it, I want you to think about the self-preservation instinct, wanting to preserve yourself versus wanting to help people, because you'll see both of those play out.
That is a huge.
So, huge buffalo.
Huge buffalo.
There's a mama buffalo behind him, a baby buffalo. There's actually about 100 buffalo. And buffalo don't see very well, so they don't know it, but they're actually going to walk into 5 lions.
They're crouching.
So the lions see well. They actually just ate, so the lions aren't hungry, but it's very hard to resist when your lunch walks right into you. And so watch how this plays out. You'll hear the engine start up. And so unfortunately, it's survival of the fittest, which means that the lions are going to go after the baby buffalo. The buffalo can smell the lions. Here we go. 5 lions. So lions hate water. They hate water because for millions of years, crocodiles have lived in the water. A lion weighs 300 or 400 pounds. A crocodile weighs 1,500 pounds. There's no competition. So they are now helping each other, trying to get this baby buffalo out of the water. And they don't realize it, but there's a crocodile that's already slipped up in the water. In fact, that crocodile is going to try and grab that male lion. Watch this. Watch how fast this lion's reactions are to dodge the bite. Boom. Just missed. Male lion now hissing at the crocodile. Watch how the lions all communicate with each other, realize they need to get out of the water. Literally, this crocodile is going to steal their lunch. Watch this. Boom. Crocodile's got the baby, pulling it in. Look at this. Herding instinct. Helping each other. CEO. Look at this. 4 lions helping each other against a 1,500-pound crocodile. And sure enough, because of that, because they help each other, they win. And in the meantime, the buffalo had a meeting. And buffalo usually run from lions. But that's not what's going to happen today. Watch carefully the CEO. And now something different's going to happen. One buffalo is going to get a crazy idea. And he's going to charge a lion. Watch this. charges, turns around to run, realizes through the corner of his eye that just worked, and now that buffalo chases lions. That's an innovation. That's a success. He comes back, he does this. Oh, that's gotta hurt. Okay, now lions running away in all directions. Look at this. These buffalo are changed. They all just witnessed this. They're no longer afraid. Look, the baby calf is standing up, inspired by all this. And sure enough, walks away. Now, this is just called stubbornness. Because they don't have the baby buffalo. They're still trying to hold their ground. But these buffalo will have none of that anymore. And they chase away the lions. Look at this. They chase away even the male lion. I won't show it till the end because it's about 8 minutes long, but there's this wonderful moment. Maybe we'll see it. Where this is just, if you missed the beginning and you came in and just saw that, it would be very weird. But that lion turns back, that male lion, he turns back and he just stares. Like, what the heck just happened? How do we end up running from buffalo today? Here's my point. Perpetrators, not that the lions are perpetrators, but I think we're all rooting for the baby buffalo. Perpetrators, collaborators, the crocodiles, the bystanders, all those buffalo not involved, the victim, that baby calf. We can be clear about 3 of these categories. The bystander, however, is the fulcrum, is the point of change. In other words, perpetrators and collaborators have a triangle with the victim that can't change because they benefit by exploiting the victim, and the victim can't do anything about it. And that goes on indefinitely until the bystanders do something. In other words, the bystanders are the only ones that can make change. Example, slave, victim. Collaborators, people buying bricks, buying cotton. Slave owner is the perpetrator. That went on not for decades, for hundreds of years, until all the bystanders that weren't involved said, that's enough. And then it stopped. In other words, bystanders are not only the ones that can make change, they're the only ones that can make change. We, the bystanders, are the only ones that can change everything. So, the problem is that perpetrators hang out with other perpetrators. And so it's hard for them to realize what they're doing is wrong because everyone else is doing the same thing. And I know we think we would never do slavery or Nazism, but we're involved, I think, in all kinds of things. And I know you won't like this one, but we know they suffer. I mean, we know they suffer. And we know that it's not sustainable. In fact, it's one of the largest contributors to our biggest problem of global warming. And we know it's sort of very questionable ethical. And even stranger is that by eating too much of it, it's the #1 reason that we'll die. I mean, cardiovascular disease, the primary cause of it, eating too much meat, it's the #1 reason we die, and yet we still do it. And so the real problem arises, which is that everybody wants to change the world, but nobody wants to change. Here's the second thing, and it's called the third thing, and it just means this. You hear somebody scream down a dark alley, there's a herding instinct in you that wants to go down and help. And there is a self-preservation instinct in you that doesn't want to get hurt and doesn't want to go down and help. But because we're smarter than that monkey, we get the third thing, which is that we know that the right thing to do is to try and go down and help. We get a moral idea. And it changes everything for Homo sapiens. Everything is different for us. I'm actually convinced that even animals have this idea. And I know it's a little weird that I'm showing a cat video, but I think this cat knows the difference between right and wrong. So, that is why I'm kind of more of a dog person. How do we make a difference? The only people that make a difference in the world are people that believe, that know, that have internalized that they can make a difference. You have to believe, know, and internalize that you actually can make a difference. If you don't believe it, you'll never try to do it. How do we know that? Because we've had global problems solved before. Remember? We used to have an ozone hole. It was growing out of control 25 years in a row. If it had reached the halfway point, it would have all bubbled up on one side. We wouldn't have had an ozone hole. It would have been catastrophic for the planet. Some people, like you and I, at a conference just like this, who are not responsible for ozone holes, heard about it and met in the back of the room and said, we got to do something. And they took on themselves to start to fly around the world and get more people to help them, to educate people that chlorofluorocarbons were causing the ozone hole and you could switch very easily to something else. And because of that, the ozone hole has been shrinking or stabilized, depending on which scientists you speak to. Bystanders. It wasn't the UN ozone hole fixing committee or the Chinese American ozone. People just like you and I. They showed up to fix a global problem, and they actually successfully did that. 2, you'd think it's a hard thing for an organization then to change. The United Nations, probably the most bureaucratic and political organization I know in the world. We went to them almost 15 years ago, desperately trying to say that their original charter, which was to stop nuclear war, was not the most important problem anymore in the world. That maybe it was about hunger and food and water and energy and healthcare and education, and that should be the biggest problems in the world. I thought it would take our lifetime. I thought it would take 20 or 30 years. And they did it in 4. In 4 years, they disrupted themselves. And now, the entire charter of the UN has agreed on the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Several years after that, I realized the whole world is focused on problems. Is that all we are? Is that what life is about? We just fix problems? I felt that it was underachieving. We could do great things. We could do great things in the world that don't fix problems. We didn't go to the moon to fix a problem. We talk about moonshots all the time as if find your biggest problem and fix it. That's not what going to the moon was about. It was just an incredible thing that humanity could do. So in 2019, we created and submitted a group of incredible things that humanity could do that don't really fix problems. We call them the Global Inspirational Goals. And we submitted it with mixed admiration at the UN. But we should have a global internet. Everyone in the world should have access to the internet. I can't tell you exactly what problem it fixes, but it probably fixes a whole lot of things. We should have one currency, and I shouldn't have to change currencies and every time I move. We should have one citizenship for people who are traveling, modern governance. I mean, it's a crazy list. But clearly, we should do a whole set of extraordinary things because that's what living is about. And we should fix problems. 3, we talked about this a little last night. Good leaders do things different than great leaders. It's critical to know and understand the difference. There's a couple dozen things, but this is one of them, just to help you to understand that there's a big difference between good and great leaders. Good leaders create followers. Great leaders know that organizations where everyone follows the boss, that the boss can make mistakes too and do dumb things. And then everyone ends up making the same mistake. And so great leaders don't create more followers. They spend their time creating more great leaders. And the best of them create leaders that know how to create more leaders. They develop leaders who can develop leaders recursively, and that changes and transforms an entire organization. 4, great leaders don't suffer. This is a difficult one to get. But if you looked at the greatest leaders in the world, they don't suffer. They don't live in states that they don't want. Anger, revenge. You look at Nelson Mandela or Martin Luther King or Gandhi, They have a love for the people who have done harmful things to them. They don't live in suffering states. The worst decisions in the world get made by leaders that are suffering. It's believed that Putin was in his basement looking at maps during COVID and then decided that they should re-grab. You look at the presidents of the United States and the decisions they make when they're suffering, and then they just create more and more suffering. There's only two states human can be in: non-suffering states, peaceful, joyful, loving, and suffering states, upset, depressed, hateful. And human beings are fully capable of living an entire life in non-suffering states. And we know that because there are enlightened people in the world. And it's the very definition of enlightenment. They don't suffer from anything. And all of us can learn that. It's just somehow it didn't become a priority. And so it's so rare today that few people even know someone that doesn't suffer. But suffering occurs in our mind. It's not caused by other people or external events. The liberation from suffering happens when we do two things. We observe our suffering, and then we understand the true cause of our suffering, which is rarely the thing that we think it is. It's much more often just repeatedly thinking about it. Repeatedly thinking about it, and then having that emotion is the suffering. Happiness is a realization. And I realize now, after focusing on these sustainable development goals in an effort to try and relieve suffering, that even if we solve all those problems, we will still have suffering in the world. And so now my desire and hope is for people to understand that as we move away from suffering, which is inaction or hyperactivity, we get into happiness and productivity. And we should have only one goal first, which is global enlightenment. We should focus on getting people free from suffering, which means that all the other things would just be problems. We still have problems, but we wouldn't be suffering from them. And we would probably get the only upgrade that is available to humanity. The only way, the only upgrade I know of for the human brain is this one. 5, great leaders don't develop skills, they develop attributes. Attributes are not skills. They're like courage, drive, collaboration, humility. They develop these, and then they transform themselves. And then other people want to become like them. Exponential leaders, they don't try to change the world, they change themselves. And as they change themselves, they become an extraordinary example, and other people change around them. And we know that because we look at the greatest leaders in the world, and that's what they did. Skills are useful in known environments. You learn to shoot a gun, it works well as long as you're on land. First mission underwater, useless. That's why SEALs get trained on attributes. They get trained to be adaptable, creative, persevere, persistent. They teach them attributes. And then it doesn't matter how the world changes, the attributes are still effective. But they show up. You got to show up, and it takes this courage to actually show up. It doesn't mean doing dumb things. Courageous doesn't mean dumb things. It means some judgment, but there's still courage, because there's no courage unless you're afraid. Not physical courage. I know I showed the video of physical courage. I'm talking about moral courage. Best photo I know of it, this one. I don't know if you can see it. Adolf Hitler just spoke. It was illegal not to hail the Hitler. I don't know if you can see him. I saw this photo. I was like, how did he get the courage to do that? I didn't know who he was for 9 months. And then I met a woman in Denmark who knew exactly who he was. She tells me the story. In fact, she tells me the circle was drawn by the Nazis to identify him. And he tried to escape to Denmark, and he got caught, and that's how she knows who he was. August Landmasser joins the Nazi Party in 1931, hoping for a job. Meets Irma Eckler in the photo, falls in love, gets engaged. Nazis believe she's part Jewish, so he's expelled from the party, and his marriage is denied. And that's when the photo is taken. In other words, August Landmasser gets the courage to say, I'm not doing it because of his love and compassion for Irma. Flee to Denmark, caught, arrested, charged with dishonoring the race. He's acquitted, lack of evidence. He's warned of a multi-year prison sentence if he does it again. He continues anyway. He gets caught, arrested again. He gets caught and arrested a third time. And then he gets 2.5 years hard labor in prison, and he's killed in action in the war. And Irma gets sent to Bamberg, where she's killed with 10,000 other Jews. Because all acts of courage do not go rewarded. Few are willing to brave the disapproval of their fellows, the censure of their colleagues, the wrath of their society. Moral courage is a rarer commodity than bravery in battle or great intelligence. Yet it is the one essential, vital quality for those who seek to change a world which yields most painfully to change. Not all of us can do great things, but we can do small things with great love. Little things compound into big things. We know it from a scientific law, the butterfly effect, that something as small as the flutter of a butterfly's wing ultimately causes a typhoon halfway around the world. We know it because we model the typhoons on supercomputers, and we see them form with little wispy winds off the coast of Portugal until they build up into a level 5 hurricane and then hit the Virgin Islands and destroy everything. Because little things compound into big things, which means little actions we take can compound into big actions. And so if you were to look at the greatest leaders in the world, we would all be hard-pressed to have their character, their attributes. But even they get inspired by small acts. Martin Luther King attributes all of his work to one woman. One woman because of where she chose to sit on a bus. Understand what I'm saying. The world got changed because of one woman's courage in a single moment in her life because of where she chose to sit on a bus. Each time a person stands up for an ideal, acts to improve the lot of others, strikes out against injustice, they send forth a tiny ripple of hope. And crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, those ripples build a current that can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. And so now we see the potential of a human being. What is the potential of a baby? Anyone? Unlimited. Anybody doubt it? What's your potential? I mean, I guarantee it is greater than a baby's. But as we go through life, we create our own walls in our mind about what our potential is. And then we live inside of that fake wall. Most people never leave the town that they were born in. Not because anyone stops them. They just never have either the curiosity or the interest to just try somewhere else for a few months. We limit ourselves, and then we live out that life. I talked about exponential technology at the beginning of the conversation. Woodley did too. It's very hard to comprehend what is about to happen, the power that is coming with exponential technology. But understand one thing. Technology is exponential because we make it so. We are the exponential being. Technology being exponential is just a side effect of the extraordinary being that we are. A few more slides and I'll close. This is your life in squares. Each square is a week. This is the first year you were born, 52 weeks. This is your early years, elementary school, middle school, high school, maybe college. And here's your work. Maybe you get married, divorced, whatever in here, you're working. And then here's maybe your retirement if you live that long. I know it looks very depressing when you look at it this way. But one thing is certain. The ending is certain. The ending's certain. You end up here, we end up here. And so the question is, thinking with the end in mind, how do we get here with no regrets? There is an investment banker in New York. She's actually Australian, but she worked in New York. And she wanted to know the answer to this question, so she quits her job. And she became a palliative care nurse, started taking care of people that had only a few weeks left to live. And she did it because she wanted to know the answer. What were the biggest regrets of your life? Bronnie Ware was her name. And she wrote a book. She actually didn't write it. She wrote the blog, and people read the blog and wrote the book for her. It's called Regrets of the Dying. It's not well written, so it's not a good book, but the lessons in it, I think, are invaluable. And she made a discovery, and what she discovered was that everybody had the same 5 regrets. People who were dying had just wished they'd just let themselves be happier, laughed, and stayed silly. They realized just being in the moment was more important than most of everything else they thought about. They wished they had stayed in touch with their friends. They lost touch with their old friends that they enjoyed spending time with. They wished they'd had the courage to express their feelings and spoke up, told people they loved them, spoke up against things that they thought were wrong. Wish they hadn't worked so hard on a treadmill of existence. But the number one reason by far was that people who were dying had wished they'd had the courage to not live the life that others expected of them. Meaning, we go through life and we do what others expect of us rather than pursuing our own big dreams. The 5 regrets, this is Paul Graham, he runs Y Combinator. It's probably the best incubator in the world, but still, pretty insightful quote for a guy who runs an incubator. 5 regrets paint a portrait of a post-industrial person who shrinks into a shape that fits their circumstances and then turn dutifully till they stop. In other words, we become a cog. We get into something and then we just kind of keep doing that thing over and over again until we die. And cogism isn't valuable. Cogs are easily replaced. Cogism is not much of a life. And the only way to break out of cogism is courage. It is the only way. You have to do something courageous with yourself to make the change of your life. And if you have to, run away a little bit like that big buffalo did. The courage to do one brave thing and maybe run like hell. And so the only thing I hear when I say that is people say, well, what if I don't have the courage? Where would I get that from? And having spent many years in the service, like our driver here in the back, 20 years, thank you for that. I've realized after seeing many people win medals of courage that nobody wins a medal of courage because they wanted to win a medal of courage. Nobody's courageous because they wanted to be courageous. It's always the same reason. You ask them, and why did you do that? They say, because I loved my family. I loved my fellow officer. I loved my community. I loved my country. You grow your compassion, and the courage comes with it for free. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the judgment that something else is more important than fear, like love and compassion. The brave may not live forever, like August Landmasser, but the cautious do not live at all. I'll end with this. Global impact begins with courage, and the courage is to change ourselves. I hope something I said to you was valuable today. I appreciate your patience. It's a long talk. It's a lot of information. You're a wonderful audience. I'm grateful again for the work that you do here with the university. I'm grateful to the teachers, the professors, the administrators, and I'm grateful to the students that have a future ahead of them and a very aspiring life. So thank you very, very much for having me. Thank you. Thank you very much. 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 Thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Roberts. That was absolutely fantastic. I was riveted. I didn't even realize the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
On behalf of our students, faculty, staff, community. There we go. Thank you so much once again, okay? We really appreciate it on behalf of the faculty, staff, and students. That was absolutely phenomenal. Thank you. Are you going to stick around for any questions, comments? All right, great. Excellent. Mr. Roberts is going to stick around for any questions and comments, and if you just want to chat with him. Dr. Harris? We'll pass the mic back.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for this speech. And I get the sense that irrespective of the question, one of the things you might be thinking is that what you got out of all this that I said? That's the one thing you're hung up on. But the question I have is related to the comments you made about AI. And we think of AI from the standpoint of the ways in which our lifestyles can be enhanced and our lives can be better because of AI. What about that one narcissist global leader who wants to use AI for global dominance? That would negate anything between now and 20 years from now that we think will be the shape of our lives.
Appreciate it. Appreciate you asking that question. Conversations you have. There's AI, which is what we see now, which is very narrow artificial intelligence. There's AGI, which is general intelligence, meaning it learns almost anything. It learns like we can learn. And that, I think, is, the engineers believe that may be only 3 to 7 years away. Putin has said whoever runs AGI runs the world. Xi has made it a imperative that China become the leader for AI by 2030. The pace that AI is growing is higher than any engineer or scientist that I have spoken to. It surprised all of us. Even today, it's still surprising us. And I didn't have time today, but I don't know if you've seen the text to video. Have anyone seen this? So now you've seen text to an image where you say, oh, create an image of a beautiful forest with a unicorn in the middle, and it'll create an image 1 second later. But now they have text to video where you say, give me an image of, in fact, the one I saw was golden retriever puppies jumping through the snow. And then seconds later, it creates a full video of golden retriever puppies from scratch, though, right? It's not using other videos, like taking the actual clips, it's creating that. So I think by the end of the year, it's very likely we'll see full advertisements that are totally just created in AI. And within the next few years, for sure, we'll see entire movies. You may be able in our lifetime to just say, I want a movie. So here's this issue, though. As it gets better, it clearly gets also more powerful. And that is a very real concern. In fact, I think you know the story that it didn't play out the way OpenAI was chartered initially. It was supposed to be open source and nonprofit, and now it's become for-profit. And now one of the biggest companies in the world, Microsoft, owns almost all of it, and the technology is proprietary just for them. And that is probably not the world I think we want. And so how do we manage that in the future? And my belief and answer is that the only safe future is to have many AIs. To think that human beings will be able to control a very, very smart AI is the same thinking as your dog or cat, probably more likely your cat has, of trying to control you. It may be something they want, but they're just not intellectually capable of doing that. And so this future is very, very strange, what we're going into. But the answer is distribution, is decentralized, is collaboration. And some people will say, well, that's dangerous because China and Russia will get it if we open it and decentralize it. But I guarantee you it is far safer. It is an enormous amount of power to have in a small number of people. And I think we all know the quotes around what happens when very few people have too much power. So decentralization is how we gain safety. It's a wonderful question. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Well, Mr. Roberts is going to be around, so you'll have an opportunity to speak with him. At this point, we would like to give you a tour of the facility, if you would like to do that. We're going to meet in the lobby area. We're going to have 2 or 3 of us giving tours. We have the maker space running. We have the innovation lab up and running. So if you'd like to, we'll just take a short field trip. Thank you so much for coming, and I'll see you in the lobby.